On the coast of Rogaland, an old fisherman named Eirik placed his last meal on a flat stone. He expected no dawn. His sons were gone. A storm gathered over the fjord. The shore felt tight around him. People called nights like this the waiting hours. When fear pressed on a village, the meal changed. Eirik knew every bite mattered. He held dried fish, smoked lamb fat, and a bowl of warm barley broth. He had seen men eat these same things before battle. He had seen elders prepare them when sickness spread. He felt the weight of the night. If you want to know what people from Viking times ate when death stood close, his story waits here. Eirik sat by the shore. The sky turned dark. The wind lifted his hair. He placed his final meal on a stone beside him. People from his village whispered about nights like this, nights with no promise of morning. Some faced battle, some faced sickness, some faced storms. Each person held food linked to fear and duty. Eirik knew the taste of danger. He felt it in his throat. He prepared the meal his father taught him for nights of expected death. Dried fish, smoked lamb fat, warm barley broth. Each held a purpose. Each held memory. His hands did not shake. He ate as the waves rose in the dark. You are here with a calm mind. Take a slow breath. Let your shoulders drop. Settle into your seat. Let the room hold you. If you watch at night, soften the light. Pull a blanket close. Slow everything around you. Before we follow Eirik into this quiet and tense night, tell me where you watch from. I like knowing your place in the world. If you enjoy these stories, you are welcome to like, comment, and subscribe in your own time. No rush. This story moves slow. The shore is quiet. The air is cold. Eirik waits for us to join him. When you feel ready, we begin with his meal and the fear that shaped it. Eirik rose from the stone where he had placed his meal. The air near the fjord smelled of salt and smoke. The night pressed close against the village. Snow hid in the wind. He pulled his cloak tight and walked toward the longhouse. His steps scraped across the frozen ground. Each sound felt sharp. People stayed indoors on nights like this. He heard no voices. He saw no torchlight outside. He felt as if the whole coast waited. Inside the longhouse, fire burned in a low pit. The light shook across the wooden beams. Eirik's daughter-in-law, Asa, sat with a blanket over her knees. Her son slept beside her. Her eyes lifted when Eirik entered. She did not ask why he had left his meal outside. She understood the signs. Eirik had lost both his sons last winter. The sea had taken their boat. He found only a half-sunk hull. He knew how these nights worked. Sorrow pulled a person toward old customs. Asa rose and dipped her head. She placed more driftwood on the fire. The sound of it cracking filled the room. She spoke in a soft voice. It held care and strain. She asked if he felt safe. He said he felt steady. She asked if he wanted warm broth. He said he had some on the shore. She did not argue. She sat again and held her child close. Eirik watched the fire. He thought about old stories his father once told, stories about nights when danger drew near, stories about last meals. His father said fear taught people how to eat. Food signaled strength or farewell. People shaped their meals to guide the mind. Salted fish helped a person stay awake. Dried lamb fat fed strength. Barley broth gave calm. Honey soothed the throat. All of it served a purpose. He felt each taste pull old feelings to the surface. He moved toward the fire and warmed his hands. Asa asked if he wanted to speak with the elder. Eirik shook his head. He wanted silence. He wanted to hear the wind outside. He wanted to feel the pressure of the storm. Asa stayed quiet. She respected his choice. The longhouse shook as the wind struck the roof. Eric thought back to his own childhood. When he was small, his grandmother had taught him about nights of waiting. She said the food shaped the mind for struggle or acceptance. She said a last meal did not mark surrender. It marked focus. When a village faced death, food kept thoughts clear. Meat fat fed strength, grain steadied nerves, sour berries woke the senses, warm broth slowed harsh breath. Each person used food in a different way. Eric sat by the fire and rubbed his thumb across a wooden cup. He thought about the dried fish outside. He had salted it 2 days earlier. He caught it during sunrise when the water lay still. He remembered its weight on his line. He remembered gutting it and hanging it near the smoke rack. The act gave him purpose. That mattered. When a person expected death, they clung to purpose. Asa shifted her weight and asked if he wanted her company. He thanked her, but told her to rest. She nodded. She pulled the blanket higher around her son. Eirik watched the boy breathe. The child was the last piece of his bloodline. This thought struck him. It sat heavy in his chest. He rose again. He walked toward the entrance. He heard the wind rush across the fjord. He felt the pull of the storm. He stepped outside. The cold hit him hard. Snow circled in the air. The village lay dark. Only the glow from windows cut small holes in the night. He held the edges of his cloak close. He walked toward the shore once more. The stone where he placed his food waited ahead. Snow gathered on top of the meal. He brushed it away. He sat. The storm grew louder. The waves crashed higher. He looked across the water and saw faint flashes from far lightning. It struck near the horizon. The fjord looked alive. He tasted the barley broth first. It warmed his throat. It eased the tightness in his chest. He ate the dried fish. Its salt pulled his tongue tight. It pushed him awake. He felt his heartbeat slow and settle. He tore a strip of lamb fat and chewed. It softened in his mouth. It brought strength back into his limbs. Each piece held memory. Each piece held meaning. His father once told him about a night when raiders approached the coast. His father was young then. The village prepared for a battle they expected to lose. Elders ate dried fish with sea salt. Warriors ate lamb fat to store strength. Children ate warm barley gruel. Women served smoked herbs in broth to steady breath. When death pressed close, people shaped their meals to guide their bodies. Eirik pulled his cloak tighter and held the bowl against his chest. He thought about the night his sons died. They had eaten smoked fish and barley before sailing. They felt strong. They felt ready. But the water rose fast. The waves overturned the boat. Eric found signs of them days later. He kept their last meal in his memory. It stayed with him. Snow clung to his beard. He wiped it away. The storm grew sharper. He felt its push. He thought about leaving the shore, but he wanted to finish the meal. These meals mattered in Viking life. They shaped courage. They shaped the final hours. They told the world a person stood firm. Eric wanted the sea to see his strength. As the storm pressed in, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned. It was Arnvid, the village elder. The old man held a torch that cracked in the wind. Arnvid stepped beside Eirik and lowered himself to the stone. He placed his own bowl beside him. Arnvid spoke in a clear voice. He asked why Eric had chosen this night. Eric said he felt the pull of the past. Arnvid nodded. He said he understood. He said the storm touched every mind in the village. He said old fears rose in weather like this. Arnvid told Eric a story from his youth. He said when people expected death, they ate food linked to strength and memory. He said these meals reminded them of seasons when they lived fuller lives. A meal shaped the mind toward courage. Arnvid looked at Eirik's dried fish and broth. He said the choices showed balance, strength, calm, focus. Eirik listened. The wind howled. Snow spun around them. Arnvid placed his hand on Eirik's shoulder. He said no person faced death alone. He said the village stood with him. Eirik felt the words settle in his chest. They cut through the storm. Arnvid asked if he wanted company through the night. Eirik said he welcomed it. The old man leaned forward and warmed his hands near the torch. He asked if Eirik felt fear. Eirik said he felt sorrow. Arnvid said sorrow carried its own strength. When a person held sorrow in both hands, they understood life in full. Eirik finished his broth. He placed the empty bowl beside him. Arnvid offered him a small piece of honeycomb. Eirik accepted it. He bit into it. The sweetness cut through the cold. Arnvid said honey helped settle breath on tense nights. It soothed the throat. It hid the taste of fear. Eirik asked the elder about other last meals he had seen. Arnvid shared stories. A hunter once ate smoked reindeer fat before walking into a blizzard to defend his family. A young woman once ate barley gruel with herbs before facing sickness that spread through the village. A warrior once ate dried fish and cold water before rowing out to meet raiders alone. Arnvid said each meal showed purpose. Purpose shaped the final hours. Eirik looked at the waves. He asked Arnvid if he believed people sensed death before it came. Arnvid said he believed people sensed change. He said the body held memory. He said old storms reminded the heart of loss. Eirik understood this. The two men sat together. The storm grew stronger. The snow thickened. The fjord roared. The torch struggled, but stayed lit. Arnvid placed more dry moss near the flame. The fire flared. The light cut through the dark. Eirik felt its warmth. He thought about Asa and the sleeping boy. He thought about his sons. He thought about his own father. He thought about the weight of food in the old stories. He thought about how people shaped fear with meals. He felt a strange steadiness. The storm no longer pushed at him. It seemed to pass around him. Arnvid said the night would be long. He said storms like this tested the mind. He said Eirik's meal had served its purpose. It brought calm. It brought focus. Eirik nodded. He felt the truth of it. The waves rose. The wind screamed. Snow spun in thick sheets. Yet the two men stayed. They watched the fjord. They listened to the storm. They shared the weight of the night. Eirik felt a slow warmth spread in his chest. It did not come from the fire. It came from the steady presence beside him. Arnvid knew these nights. Arnvid had faced them before. Eirik felt less alone. The storm reached its peak. Then slowly, the sound shifted. The wind eased. The waves softened. The snow lightened. The fjord calmed. The clouds drifted. The sky opened. A few stars shone through. Eirik lifted his head. He watched the sky. Arnvid rose slowly. He said the night had passed its worst. He said Eirik had faced the storm with strength. He said the meal had done its work. Eirik stood. His legs felt steady. He breathed slow. The air tasted clean. The weight he expected did not come. Arnvid placed his hand on his shoulder once more. He said Eirik lived through the waiting hours. Eirik looked at the horizon. He saw faint light. Dawn would come. He felt surprise. He felt relief. He felt a pull toward the longhouse. He felt the need to see Asa and the boy. He picked up his bowl. He brushed the snow from the stone. He turned toward the path. Arnvid walked beside him. The storm faded behind them. The village rested in soft silence. Eirik pushed open the longhouse door. The fire still glowed. Asa looked up from the blanket. Her eyes widened when she saw him. He nodded. She understood. He sat by the fire. The warmth wrapped around him. He felt alive. He felt present. Asa handed him a wooden cup of warm water. He drank. His hands no longer shook. The storm passed. The night changed. The waiting ended. The meal shaped him. The old customs held their place. Eirik woke before the fire rose. The longhouse held a deep stillness. Asa slept beside her son. The air felt warmer than the night before. He sat up and touched the bowl on the floor near him. He remembered the storm. He remembered Arnvid's torch. He remembered the weight he carried into the night and the strange calm he carried back. He stood and stepped outside. The sky held a thin line of pale light. Snow covered the village roofs. Smoke drifted from a few vents. The wind felt soft. He walked toward the shore. His steps left fresh marks in the snow. The stone where he had placed his meal waited under a thin crust of ice. He touched the stone with his palm. His breath rose in white clouds. He looked across the fjord. The water moved slow. The storm had spent its force. He felt steady in a way he had not felt since the loss of his sons. The waiting hours had pushed him to old customs. The food had shaped his mind. The storm had challenged him. The night held no victory or defeat. It held a simple truth. Life pressed onward. He saw a figure walking from the far end of the shore. It was Arnvid. The elder leaned on a stick. His cloak dragged across the snow. Eirik walked toward him. They met halfway. Arnvid greeted him with a slow nod. He looked at Eric's face and smiled. The smile held approval. Arnvid said he slept little after the storm. He said the storm stirred old memories. Eirik asked him which ones. Arnvid said he remembered a night when he stood on the same shore as a young man. He said he also expected death then. He said a sickness had reached the village. He said people prepared their last meals with slow hands. He said old women boiled herbs in large pots. He said men salted fish in silence. He said children drank thin gruel. Arnvid said he survived that night. He said most people survived. The meals held them steady. Eirik listened. He asked Arnvid if these meals shaped every generation. Arnvid said they did. He said people lived close to danger in Viking times. He said food marked the line between fear and strength. He said each person learned these customs early. He said every winter raised new threats. He said storms tested the mind. He said sickness tested the body. He said raids tested the heart. He said meals held the village together. They walked along the shore. Snow crunched under their feet. Eirik felt a warmth inside him. The storm no longer pressed on his chest. He asked Arnvid why he brought honey to the shore last night. Arnvid said honey soothed fear. He said honey showed a person they still held sweetness in life. Eirik nodded. The words sat deep in him. They reached a small inlet. Ice floated on the water. Eirik paused. He watched the slow drift. He felt the weight of the night begin to lift. Arnvid placed his hand on his shoulder again. He said the worst storms passed in silence. He said Eirik survived because he met the night with purpose. They turned back toward the village. Eirik's steps felt lighter. When they reached the longhouse, Arnvid said he wanted to speak to the council later. He said the village needed to prepare for the next days. He said storms often left damage on the hills. He said hunters needed support. He said the fields needed clearing. Eric said he would help. Arnvid walked away. Eric stepped inside the longhouse. Asa sat by the fire. She stirred a pot of warm grain. She looked up and greeted him with a soft voice. She asked how he felt. He said he felt steady. She smiled in relief. She handed him a wooden bowl. He ate slow. The grain warmed him. The boy woke. He stretched his arms. He looked at Eric with wide eyes. Eric smiled at him. The boy crawled into his lap. Eric held him. The warmth of the child's body pressed against him. It felt grounding. After the meal, Eric stepped outside again. The village began to wake. People brushed snow off their steps. Smoke rose from each longhouse. A few dogs trotted across the central path. Women carried buckets toward the well. Men gathered near the sheds where tools hung. The village moved into its day. Eric walked toward the storage shed at the edge of the village. He opened the door. The smell of dried fish and cured meat filled the air. Barley sacks lined the wall. He checked each row. Supplies looked strong. He felt pride in this. He had helped prepare stores in the autumn. He grabbed a wooden rake and walked toward the far fields. Snow rested on the brush. He planned to clear some space for the goats. Asa joined him. She carried a small basket with herbs inside. She said she wanted to gather fresh snow for water. She walked beside him. Their steps matched. When they reached the field, Eric began to rake snow away from the low fence. Asa scooped fresh snow into her basket. She worked with calm movements. The boy ran circles around them. He laughed. His laughter cut through the cold. Eric paused and watched the boy. The child held no fear. The night storm did not touch him. Eric felt a small lift in his chest. He turned back to the fence and kept working. As he raked, he thought about the meals people shared on nights of expected death. He thought about the old stories. He thought about the strength those meals held. He thought about the village that kept those customs alive. Asa spoke to him. She asked if the storm reminded him of the night the boat sank. Eric nodded. He said he felt the same tightness before the storm. Asa placed her hand on his arm. She said she was grateful he returned from the shore. He looked at her and felt a calm he had not felt in months. They finished clearing the fence. Eric lifted the boy onto his shoulders. They walked back toward the longhouse. The sun rose higher. The snow glowed. The village looked stronger than it felt the night before. Inside the longhouse, Eric sat again by the fire. He sharpened a small knife. Asa dried herbs near the heat. The boy stacked small pieces of wood. The room felt peaceful. Eric felt the storm shift into memory. As he sharpened the blade, he thought about Arnvid's stories. He wondered about the meals future generations would prepare when they faced death. He wondered if his grandson would learn the same customs. He wondered if Asa would teach him the meaning of honey, broth, dried fish, smoked fat, and barley. He placed the knife down. He leaned back against the wall. He closed his eyes. His breath moved slow. His body felt tired in a good way. The storm drained him. The calm restored him. A knock sounded at the door. Arnvid entered. Snow clung to his boots. He said the council gathered. He asked Eric to join. Eric stood. Asa nodded in support. He stepped outside with the elder. They walked toward the meeting hall. Men and women gathered there. Each held concern in their eyes. Arnvid stepped forward and addressed the group. He spoke about the storm. He spoke about the risks near the ridge. He spoke about the need for hunters to check the slopes for fallen trees. He spoke about watching for wolves. He spoke about clearing paths for the children. The council agreed. They assigned tasks. Eric agreed to join 2 hunters in checking the far ridge. He walked toward the storage shed and grabbed his spear. He tightened his cloak. 2 hunters, Leif and Toror, joined him. They nodded to him. The 3 men walked through the village and entered the forest trail behind the fields. Snow rested on branches. Sunlight filtered through gaps. Eric felt the cold air enter his lungs. Leif led the way. He walked with steady steps. Toror followed close. Eric walked behind them and watched for fresh tracks. They climbed the slope toward the ridge. The wind carried the smell of pine. The snow deepened. Leif raised his hand. He pointed toward a fallen tree near the ridge. They walked closer. The tree blocked the path. Toror knelt and checked the ground. He said the storm dropped the tree. He said the path needed clearing. They spent a long time moving branches. Eric lifted heavy limbs and tossed them aside. Leif cut smaller branches with his axe. Toror held the trunk steady. They worked in silence. Breath rose in quick bursts. Snow fell off branches above them. When they finished, they rested. They sat on the cleared trunk. Leif pulled a small pouch from his cloak. He handed each man a piece of dried fish. They ate. The salt hit their tongues. Eric felt his strength rise. Toror drank warm water from a horn. He passed it to Eric. The water soothed his throat. Leif asked about Eirik's night. Eric said Arnvid joined him by the shore. Toror looked at him with quiet respect. He said these nights tested people. He said Eirik stood strong. Eric said the meal helped. Leif nodded. He said dried fish shaped his mind before any hard moment. Toror said smoked fat did the same for him. Each man spoke of food as a guide. Eric listened. Their words felt familiar. They left the ridge and walked deeper into the forest. Eric spotted fox tracks. Leif pointed to rabbit, prints. Toror checked the trees for damage. They reached a small clearing. Eirik paused. He felt a strange pull. The clearing looked familiar. He stepped forward. He recognized a stone half buried near the center. His father once brought him here as a child. His father said this place held old roots. He said people gathered here before long journeys. Eirik knelt by the stone. He brushed snow away. He felt a sense of presence. Leif and Toror watched him. Eric said his father once ate his last meal here before a raid. Leif asked if his father lived through the raid. Eric said he did. Toror said the place held strong memory. They stayed in the clearing for a short time. Eric stood and turned toward the path. The forest opened ahead. Sunlight drifted across the snow. The 3 men continued their search. As they walked, Eric thought about his father's words. He thought about how food shaped courage. He thought about how this clearing linked him to his past. He thought about the storm and the calm that followed. He felt the path ahead hold new meaning. The day passed slow. They found fresh wolf tracks near a ridge. Toror marked the place with a carved branch. Leif said the tracks looked old. They moved onward. Eric checked each footprint. He felt no fear. He felt focus. By midday, they returned to the village. Smoke rose from the longhouses. People carried wood toward the fires. Children played near the central path. The air held warmth. Leif and Toror thanked Eric. They walked toward their homes. Eric headed toward the longhouse. Asa greeted him at the door. She asked how the ridge looked. He said the storm left heavy damage, but no threat. She sighed in relief. He stepped inside and sat by the fire again. The day felt long in a steady way. He felt tired, but grounded. He watched Asa stir a pot. The smell of warm broth filled the room. She handed him a cup. He drank slow. The warmth spread through his chest. The boy crawled into his lap again. Eric held him. Asa watched with a soft smile. The fire glowed, and the longhouse felt safe. Eric thought about the storm once more. He thought about his last meal on the shore. He thought about Arnvid's steady presence. He thought about the old customs passed from parent to child. He felt a sense of connection. He felt anchored. As night approached, the fire burned bright, the longhouse filled with soft, crackling sounds. Asa hummed a low tune. The boy curled beside her. Eirik rested his back against the wall and closed his eyes. Life moved forward. The night no longer pressed against him. The storm faded into memory. The meal shaped him for the days ahead. Eirik woke before sunrise again. The longhouse felt warm from the fire Asa kept through the night. The boy slept between folded blankets. Asa rested with her back against the far wall. Eirik rose with slow movement. His legs felt steady. The storm no longer echoed inside him. The night of waiting now belonged to memory. He stepped outside. The air felt cold but clear. Snow settled across the open paths. A soft blue glow reached across the fjord. Thin sheets of ice drifted along the shoreline. Eirik walked toward the water and watched the slow rise of dawn. He thought about his father again. He thought about the clearing in the forest. He thought about the strength of food on nights shaped by fear. His mind held the same calm rhythm he carried after the storm. He returned to the longhouse and gathered his tools. The day called for work. Asa opened her eyes and greeted him. She asked if he planned to join the council tasks again. He nodded. She smiled in support. The boy stretched and climbed into Eirik's lap for a moment. Eirik held him close. Then he placed him down and pulled on his cloak. Outside, the village looked alive in the morning light. People moved between paths. Men carried tools toward the hills. Women prepared warm grain for the children. Dogs padded through the snow. Smoke rose from each roof. The storm left marks, but the village stood strong. Eirik walked toward Arnvid's home. The elder waited at his doorway. He carried a small staff and a leather pouch. Arnvid greeted Eirik with a nod. He said the council wanted to check the far fields. He said the storm pulled down branches near the outer fence. He said it needed repair before night. Eirik agreed to help. They walked side by side. The snow crunched under their boots. Arnvid talked about the next seasons. He said spring would bring sowing. He said the fields needed clearing. He said people needed steady hands this time of year. Eirik listened with patience. The elder's voice carried calm strength. When they reached the far fields, they found 2 other villagers already at work. A young woman named Yrsa cut tangled branches with a hand axe. A man named Steinar lifted logs away from the fence. Eirik joined them. He picked up fallen limbs and piled them near the edge. Arnvid walked along the fence and checked each post. Yrsa asked Eirik about the storm night. She said people in the village talked about his walk to the shore. She said they respected his courage. Eirik said he followed old customs. Yrsa said customs held power. She said the old ways helped people face danger. She said her mother taught her the meaning of barley broth and smoked fat when she was young. Yrsa's words held quiet pride. Steinar asked Eirik if the elder stayed with him through the storm. Eirik nodded. Steinar said Arnvid once guided him through a night of fear after a raid. He said the elder brought dried fish and honey. He said he ate in silence and felt strength return. He said Arnvid understood the Elmer weight of fear. Eric agreed. They worked in silence for a while. Eric lifted heavy snow from the posts. Yrsa trimmed branches. Steinar hammered a loose joint back into place. Arnvid watched with steady eyes. The field slowly returned to order. Eric felt satisfaction in the work. After a long time, they stopped to rest. Yrsa passed around a small leather pouch filled with dried berries. The berries tasted sharp and sour. Eric felt the taste wake his senses. Steinar drank warm water from a horn. He passed it to Eric. Eric drank and handed it back. Arnvid stood nearby and watched the sky shift into a brighter blue. Yrsa asked Eric if he felt changed after the night of waiting. He said he felt clearer. She said storms often forced people to see their own thoughts with new sharpness. She said last meals held weight in these moments. She asked what he ate. Eric listed the dried fish, the smoked fat, the barley broth, and the honey. She nodded. She said each piece held meaning. She said the meal shaped his survival. After they rested, they continued working. Steinar tightened the corner post. Yrsa checked the hinges on the small gate. Eric tied new rope along a stretched section. The field looked strong again by midday. Arnvid inspected each part and expressed approval. When the work finished, Steinar and Yrsa left for the village. Arnvid asked Eirik to walk with him along the open snowfield toward the ridge. They walked in slow steps. The wind felt mild. Snow sparkled in the light. Arnvid said he wanted to speak about Eric's sons. The words caught Eric off guard. He tensed for a moment. Arnvid noticed. He spoke in a calm voice. He said grief shaped the meals people chose on nights they feared death. He said sorrow guided the mind. He said Eirik's choice to sit on the shore showed he still held connection to those he lost. Eirik let the words settle. They did not sting. They felt truthful. Eric said he thought of his sons through the storm. Arnvid said their memory pushed him forward. He said this strength passed through bloodlines. He said the boy in the longhouse carried it now. Eirik looked toward the village. He felt a pull in his chest. He asked Arnvid how people kept sorrow from swelling until it consumed them. Arnvid said people shared meals and stories. He said people leaned on customs. He said food held memory in ways words did not. They reached a small hollow near the ridge. The wind pushed snow into shallow drifts. Arnvid said the village once gathered in this hollow during a winter sickness many years earlier. He said people came here with bowls of broth. They sat together and ate while they waited for dawn. He said the meal kept them alive. He said fear loosened when people shared the same food. Eric listened. He imagined the crowd. He imagined the warmth of breath in the cold air. He imagined bowls held between cold fingers. Arnvid placed his hand on the hollow ground. He said fear fed on silence. He said food broke silence. He said this saved many lives. Eric felt a slow shift inside. The night storm felt connected to each old story. The meals held a pattern through time. They turned back toward the village. When they reached the path, Asa walked toward them. She carried a woven basket. She greeted Arnvid and smiled at Eric. She said she planned to gather driftwood along the shore. Arnvid said the tide looked calm. He said she should stay close. Asa nodded. Eric walked with her to the beach. The boy followed, dragging a small stick behind him. Asa gathered pieces of driftwood lodged under snow. Eric helped her lift the larger ones. The boy poked the sand with his stick and watched the ice shift on the water. Asa asked Eric if the day kept his thoughts steady. He said the work felt good. She said she noticed a change in his voice since the storm. She said he spoke with more certainty. He said the meal shaped him. She said she believed him. She placed a piece of driftwood in the basket. The boy laughed at a gull landing nearby. After they collected enough wood, they walked toward the longhouse. The air grew warmer. Snow softened along the edges of the path. Inside, Asa lit a fresh fire. Eirik helped her place the wood around the pit. The flames grew slow and steady. They warmed the room. As the afternoon passed, Eirik sharpened his spear. Asa dried herbs near the fire. The boy traced shapes in the ash. The longhouse felt calm. Eirik thought about the next seasons. He thought about the old meals. He thought about how food carried strength for people facing the worst. Later, Arnvid visited again. He carried a small clay pot. Inside sat warm broth mixed with herbs. He said a traveler returned from a nearby village and brought herbs from her homeland. He said the herbs grounded the mind. He offered the pot to Eirik. Eirik thanked him. Arnvid sat on the floor. Asa prepared wooden cups and poured the broth. The smell filled the room. Eirik tasted the broth. It warmed his throat and settled his chest. Arnvid said the traveler learned the mix from her mother. He said she came from a harsh coastline where storms hit with sudden force. He said her people used herbs to hold focus on nights they expected loss. Asa listened with interest. Eirik listened with care. Arnvid said these customs passed from family to family. He said each generation shaped them to their own lives. Eirik felt the truth inside him. His father passed knowledge to him. He carried it through the storm. The boy would learn it in time. As the day turned to night, Arnvid stood and prepared to leave. He thanked Asa for the warmth. He thanked Eirik for the talk. He said tomorrow would bring more clearing and hunting. Eirik nodded. Asa bowed her head in respect. After Arnvid left, Eirik sat with Asa by the fire. They did not speak for a long time. They simply watched the flames. The boy fell asleep. The crackling fire filled the room. Eirik felt his body ease. He felt the weight of yesterday drift away. Asa asked him if he planned to walk to the shore again that night. Eirik said no. He said he had no need. She smiled. She placed another log on the fire. The room warmed. Eirik closed his eyes. His breath moved slow. He felt the meal from the night before still inside him. He felt the calm of the broth Arnvid brought. He felt present in the longhouse. He felt anchored to the world again. He let his thoughts quiet. He drifted toward rest. The storm ended. The night changed. The old customs lived forward. The village remained whole. Eirik woke at first light. The longhouse felt warm from the fire Asa tended through the night. The boy still slept under his blanket. Asa sat near the embers with her hands wrapped around a wooden cup. She greeted Eirik with a calm voice. He nodded and stretched his arms. His body held the steady strength of the last days. He stepped outside. Cold air touched his face. The sky glowed with pale colors. Snow settled in soft drifts along the path. He looked toward the fjord and watched thin sheets of ice drift with the tide. Birds called from the trees behind the village. The day felt clearer than any day since the storm. Eirik walked toward the central path. People already moved between longhouses. 2 women carried buckets from the well. A young man hammered a loose board on a storage shed. Smoke rose from each roof. The village felt alive. The cold no longer cut the spirit. The storm belonged to the past, yet its memory stayed quiet inside each person. Arnvid waited near the meeting hall. He leaned on his staff and watched the village with steady eyes. He greeted Eirik and asked if he slept well. Eirik said he slept with clarity. Arnvid nodded. He said a good sleep after a night of fear showed the meal held meaning. He said people found strength in customs when fear pressed against the mind. Eirik felt the truth of this. Arnvid said the council wanted to tend the forest path leading toward the hunting grounds. He said fallen branches and loose stones needed clearing. He said the hunters planned to travel there in 2 days. Eirik agreed to help. Arnvid placed his hand on Eirik's shoulder. He said the village needed steady hands. Eirik felt a growing sense of duty. They walked toward the edge of the village. The sun rose over the hills. Snow sparkled. Eirik carried a small axe and a coil of rope. Arnvid walked with slow steps. The old man's breath showed in thin clouds. Eirik kept close beside him. When they reached the forest edge, 2 hunters waited. Leif stood with his spear and a pack of tools. Toror carried a bundle of spare rope. They greeted Eirik and Arnvid. Leif said the path looked blocked in some places. Toror said large stones rolled from the ridge during the storm. Arnvid said the group needed to clear the way before the next hunt. They entered the forest. Snow covered the path, but their boots made firm tracks. The trees rose tall with bare branches. The wind moved through them with a soft sound. Eirik looked at each branch and searched for loose limbs. Leif pointed to a fallen tree ahead. Toror stepped toward it and knelt to inspect the roots. Eirik helped lift a heavy branch. Leif cut smaller limbs. Toror moved the trunk aside. Arnvid watched with a careful eye. When the work ended, they moved farther along the trail. The forest opened into a small clearing. Sunlight reached the snow in patches. Eirik remembered walking this way as a young man with his father. He felt the old memory rest quietly inside him. Leif pointed to a large stone that lay across the path. It looked heavy. Toror said the storm pushed it from the slope. Eirik tied rope around one side. Leif and Toror held the other ends. They pulled together. Eirik pushed from behind. The stone shifted. They pushed again. It rolled away from the trail and settled near a cluster of roots. Arnvid nodded with approval. They rested for a moment. Toror passed around dried meat from his pouch. The meat tasted sharp with smoke. Eirik felt strength rise in his limbs. Leif drank warm water from his horn. He handed it to Arnvid. The old man sipped and passed it to Eirik. The warm water steadied his breath. Arnvid asked Leif about last year's winter hunt. Leif said the hunters caught little because storms blocked the ridge. He said they ate mostly dried fish and barley during the cold months. Toror said the meal kept them clear during long nights. Eirik listened. He knew these customs shaped the hunters' minds. He understood how food held meaning even on good days. They continued along the path. Snow softened under their boots. Eirik spotted fox tracks leading toward the hills. Toror examined them. He said the fox likely searched for dry shelter after the storm. Leif pointed to a broken branch overhead. Eirik checked the trunk for cracks. He pushed the branch aside. It fell with a dull sound. They reached a narrow turn along the slope. Rocks scattered along the path. Eirik bent down and lifted the smaller ones. Leif carried the larger pieces to the side. Toror steadied the loose soil. Arnvid inspected the ridge and looked for signs of further danger. The group worked in quiet focus. After the ridge cleared, they moved toward a small stream that ran through the forest. Ice formed along the edges. Water moved under the thin layer. Eirik knelt and scooped snow from the surface. He tasted the cold water. It woke him. Arnvid said the stream brought life to the village. He said people drank from it before each seasonal journey. He said the stream gave focus. Leif pointed to a spot where the path narrowed. Branches hung across the way. Toror climbed a small slope and cut them down. The branches fell in a neat pile. Eric gathered them and tied them with rope. He planned to bring them back as kindling for Asa. Arnvid approved. They walked deeper into the forest. The path opened into a larger clearing. In the center stood an old stump surrounded by snow. The stump looked like it once belonged to a large tree. Arnvid walked toward it. He placed his hand on the rough surface. Arnvid said the stump marked a place where the village once gathered before battle. He said warriors sat here and ate last meal foods. He said they ate smoked meat to steady their bodies. He said they ate dried fish to stay alert. He said they drank warm broth to calm their breath. Eric listened. He pictured the warriors sitting in silence. He pictured the weight of the moment. Leif asked Arnvid if he ate his last meal here when he was young. Arnvid said he did. He said he prepared for a sea journey that almost took his life. He said he survived because his mind stayed clear during the storm. He said the food kept him steady. Toror stood silent and listened with deep respect. Eric placed his hand on the stump. He felt the cold wood under his palm. He felt a strange link between past and present. The stump held memory. He felt the custom of last meals live through this simple place. Arnvid said they should head back. The sun rose higher. Snow warmed in the light. The group walked along the cleared path. Eirik carried the bundle of branches. Leif and Toror walked beside him. Arnvid followed with slow, steady steps. When they reached the village, Arnvid thanked them. He said the hunters would walk safely in 2 days. Leif and Toror returned to their homes. Eric headed toward the longhouse. Asa prepared a pot near the fire. The smell of warm herbs filled the room. The boy sat on the floor and carved small lines into a piece of wood. Eirik set the bundle of branches near the wall. Asa smiled. She said the wood would help through the next nights. Eric sat by the fire. He held a cup of warm broth. Asa asked about the path. He said the group worked well. He said the forest looked safe for the next hunt. She nodded. She stirred the pot with a calm rhythm. The boy crawled into Eric's lap. Eric held him. The child leaned against his chest. Eric felt a deep warmth. He thought about the customs he learned from his father. He thought about how the boy would learn them in time. He thought about the storm night and the meal that guided him through fear. He felt the weight of memory shape into strength. In the afternoon, Eric walked to the storage shed. He checked the dried fish racks. He checked the sacks of barley. Supplies looked secure. He placed a fresh bundle of herbs near the wall. He cut a strip of smoked meat for the evening meal. He carried it back to the longhouse. Asa prepared the evening food. She cut the smoked meat into small pieces. She boiled barley in a clay pot. She added herbs and stirred with slow movements. Eirik prepared the wooden bowls. The boy helped bring small cups. The longhouse filled with warmth and quiet sound. Arnvid visited again. He stepped inside with slow steps. Snow clung to his cloak. Eirik greeted him. Asa handed him a bowl of food. Arnvid thanked her. He sat by the fire and ate with measured bites. He said the village moved with good order. He said the path would hold through the season. He praised the work of the group. Eirik asked Arnvid about the old stump in the clearing. Arnvid said it once gave focus to the warriors. He said the stump held the weight of many last meals. He said food tasted different on those days. He said fear sharpened every bite. Eric felt the truth in Arnvid's voice. Asa asked Arnvid if he used the same foods for every last meal. Arnvid said he shaped each meal to the moment. He said salty fish kept him alert before storms. He said smoked fat steadied him before sickness. He said barley broth calmed him before hard journeys. He said honey gave him breath before long nights. Asa listened with care. The boy climbed into Arnvid's lap. The elder placed a hand on his small back. The boy pressed his cheek against Arnvid's chest. The elder smiled. Eric watched with a calm heart. Arnvid finished his meal and stood. He said the village would sleep in safety tonight. He thanked Asa for the food. He thanked Eric for the work. He stepped outside into the quiet snow. Night settled over the village. The fire glowed in the longhouse. Asa placed blankets near the sleeping area. The boy curled under one of them. Eric sat by the fire and sharpened a small tool. His movements felt slow and steady. Asa sat across from him. She watched the flames. She said the village spoke with relief since the storm passed. She said people felt safe again. Eric said storms tested people. He said storms taught people the value of old customs. Asa agreed. The fire grew lower. Eric placed another log. The room warmed again. Asa moved closer to the boy and rested beside him. Eric lay down nearby. The warmth from the fire held him. His breath slowed. His eyes closed. He thought about the meal on the storm night. He thought about Arnvid's stories. He thought about the forest path and the old stump. He thought about the strength of food passed through generations. He felt connected to those who lived before him. He felt steady in the present. He felt open to the days ahead. He drifted into sleep. Eirik woke in the quiet before dawn. The longhouse felt warm. The fire glowed in low embers. Asa slept with the boy curled against her side. Eirik stood with slow, careful steps. He stretched his back and rubbed his hands together. His mind held steady calm, shaped by days of work and the memory of the storm night. The fear he felt then no longer pressed on him. What stayed was the strength that rose after it. He stepped outside. The sky showed the first thin band of pale light. Snow covered the village in smooth layers. Smoke rose from a few longhouses. The air felt still. No wind moved through the trees. Eirik breathed in deep. He felt something shift in the air, not danger, but a sense of change. He walked toward the shore. Ice drifted along the water. A gull flew low and landed near the rocks. Eirik watched it tilt its head. The fjord looked calm. He thought of his sons again. The ache shaped itself into something steady, not sharp. He touched the edge of his cloak and stood in silence for a long moment. He heard light footsteps behind him. Asa walked toward him with the boy in her arms. She said she did not want to stay inside alone. He nodded. The boy reached out to touch Eirik's shoulder. Eirik lifted him into his arms. The child leaned against him and watched the water with wide eyes. Asa said Arnvid wanted the village to gather after sunrise. She said the hunters planned their journey to the ridge. She said the council wanted to bless the tools and the food for the hunt. Eirik listened. Blessing food before a journey belonged to old custom. He had seen it many times when he was young. They walked back to the longhouse. Eirik fed the fire. Asa prepared warm grain in a small pot. The boy played with a carved stick on the floor. Eirik ate slow spoonfuls of the warm grains. The heat filled his chest. Asa drank from a wooden cup. The morning grew brighter. People began to move outside. Voices carried through the snow. Eric stepped out and saw several villagers walking toward the central space near the meeting hall. Arnvid stood at the front. He leaned on his staff and spoke to a small group. His breath showed in slow clouds. His cloak hung heavy with frost. Eric, Asa, and the boy walked closer. Arnvid raised his hand and greeted the village. He said the hunters planned to leave at midday. He said the path looked clear, thanks to the work from the day before. He said the village needed to prepare food for the men. He said the hunters needed strength in the cold days ahead. Women stepped forward, carrying baskets of dried fish, barley cakes, smoked meat, and herbs. Arnvid placed his staff on the ground and lowered himself to sit on a flat stone. He asked the hunters to kneel. Leif, Toror, and 2 younger hunters knelt in front of him. Arnvid took a piece of dried fish from a basket. He held it before the group. He said dried fish held alertness. He said it sharpened the mind. He passed a piece to each hunter. They placed it near their belts. Arnvid lifted a strip of smoked fat. He said fat steadied the limbs. He said it gave strength in long, cold hours. He gave 1 strip to each hunter. The men tucked it into small pouches hanging at their waists. He took a small bundle of herbs. He said the herbs cleared breath. He said the herbs pushed fear aside when the night grew long. Each hunter received a bundle. Then Arnvid lifted a bowl of barley cakes. The cakes looked simple but firm. He said barley fed endurance. He said it carried people through hunger. Each hunter received one. Eirik watched the ritual with quiet focus. Memories of his father returned. His father knelt like this before long journeys. He remembered the way his father touched each piece of food, not as hunger, but as duty. The boy pressed his face into Eirik's cloak. Asa held the child's small shoulders. The village watched with silence. Arnvid placed his hand on each hunter's head. He said strength lived in memory. He said food carried the past forward. He said no journey stood alone. When the ritual ended, people stepped back. The hunters stood. Leif thanked Arnvid. Toror bowed his head. The 2 young hunters nodded with respect. Arnvid stood with slow movement. Eric stepped forward to support him. Arnvid placed a hand on Eric's arm and whispered that the day felt heavy with meaning. Eric agreed. The group broke apart. Women returned to their homes. Hunters walked toward the edge of the village to prepare their gear. Arnvid asked Eirik to walk with him. They moved through the snow. Arnvid spoke in a low voice. He said last meal, foods belonged to more than nights of expected death. He said they shaped moments when people needed clarity. He said the blessing showed the same truth in another form. Eirik listened. He felt the weight of the elder's words. Arnvid said Eirik should consider joining the hunters in the spring. He said Eirik held new steadiness. He said the storm shaped him. Eirik hesitated. He said he held duty to Asa and the boy. Arnvid nodded. He said the village needed men who balanced strength with care. They reached the far end of the village. Arnvid sat on a wooden bench. Eirik stood beside him. Arnvid talked about Eric's father again. He said Eric's father once blessed hunters with dried fish from his own catch. He said the old man walked through storms with steady breath. Eirik felt his throat tighten a little. Arnvid placed a hand on his arm. The touch held strength, not sorrow. After a while, Arnvid returned to the meeting hall. Eirik walked back to the longhouse. Asa prepared more warm water. The boy drew lines in the ash with a stick. Eirik sat and felt the warmth fill him again. Asa asked how the ritual felt. Eirik said it felt heavy with meaning. She said she saw the way he watched Arnvid. She said he looked like he walked with more purpose than before. Eric said the customs pulled him closer to memory. Asa nodded. Her eyes held quiet pride. Midday came. The hunters gathered at the edge of the village. Leif tied a bundle of tools to his back. Toror tightened the strap on his spear. The two younger hunters adjusted their cloaks. The village gathered to see them off. Arnvid raised his staff and spoke. He said the hunters carried the strength of the village. He said their food held the memory of past journeys. He said they would return with the season's first hunt. Eric stood near Asa and watched the men prepare. Leif approached Eric. He said he wanted to thank him for the help clearing the path. He said he felt safe knowing the way stood open. Eric nodded. He felt respect for the young hunter. Toror placed a hand on Eric's shoulder. He said fear no longer shaped Eric's face. He said strength settled there instead. Eric thanked him. The hunters left down the forest path. The village watched in silence. Asa placed her hand in Eric's. He held it gently. The boy waved his small hand toward the trail. When the hunters disappeared into the trees, the village returned to its tasks. Women prepared food. Children carried small bundles of wood. Men repaired tools. The day moved with steady rhythm. Eric spent the afternoon helping a group repair the outer wall of a storage shed. Snow drifted onto the roof, and he brushed it away. He lifted boards and hammered them into place. His arms worked with calm strength. Yrsa arrived with a basket of herbs. She said she wanted to hang them inside the shed for drying. Eric helped her tie the cords. Yrsa asked if he planned to join future hunts. Eric said he had not decided. She said the village would welcome it. Her voice held quiet respect. After the repairs, Eric walked back to the longhouse. Asa prepared stew with smoked meat and barley. The boy sat on the floor and stacked small pieces of wood. Eric sat beside him. The boy climbed into his lap again. Eric held him close. As they ate their evening meal, Asa asked Eric about the hunters. He said they walked with steady steps. She said she hoped their journey stayed safe. Eric agreed. Night settled over the village. Stars showed through thin clouds. The fire glowed in the longhouse. Asa spread blankets on the floor. She tucked the boy under one. Eric lay near the fire again. Asa joined him. The warmth held them. Eric listened to the sounds of the fire. He thought about the blessing ritual. He thought about the last meal foods that guided people through fear. He thought about how food prepared the hunters for their journey. He felt the old customs live in each moment. He closed his eyes. His breath slowed. He felt steady. He drifted into sleep. Eric woke before the first sound in the village. The longhouse felt warm. Asa slept with the boy tucked against her side. The fire burned in low red coals. Eric sat up and rubbed his hands together. He felt calm. He felt rested. He felt steady in a way he had not known in many months. The storm night now lived inside him as a point of change, not fear. He stepped outside. The sky held thin clouds. Snow covered the paths. A faint glow pressed at the horizon. The air tasted cold and clean. He walked toward the central path. No one else walked yet. He listened to the distant groan of ice shifting in the fjord. The world carried a quiet breath. He walked toward the shore and stood near the stone where he once placed his last meal. Snow covered the surface again. He brushed it away with his palm. The stone felt colder than the air. He remembered each bite from that night. He remembered the wind pulling at his cloak, the waves crashing against the rocks. Arnvid's torch shaking in the storm. He felt the memory settle in his chest with clarity, not pain. Footsteps sounded behind him. He turned and saw Arnvid slowly making his way down the path. The elder leaned heavier on his staff this morning. Eirik walked toward him and offered his arm. Arnvid accepted with a nod. They stood together by the stone. Arnvid said he woke early because he felt something move in his thoughts. Eirik asked him what. Arnvid said the hunters reached the ridge by now. He said journeys often stirred old memory. He said he felt each past hunt echo in his bones. Eirik said he understood. Arnvid said the storm night changed Eirik in a way he could see. They stood in silence and watched the fjord. Light grew behind the clouds. Arnvid said Eirik's sons would want him to move forward. He said sorrow shaped him into a strong guardian for Asa and the boy. Eirik nodded. He felt the truth in the elder's voice. They walked back to the village. Asa stepped outside the longhouse with a wooden bowl in her hands. She greeted Arnvid and handed him warm broth. The elder drank and closed his eyes for a moment. He thanked her. The boy ran out behind her and hugged Eirik's leg. Eirik picked him up. The child laughed and reached toward Arnvid. The elder smiled and placed his hand on the small back. People began to move through the village. Women carried tools for cleaning the paths. Men checked the sheds and sorted wood. Children chased each other near the central space. Dogs ran small circles around them. The day felt wide and bright. Arnvid asked Eirik to walk with him to the meeting hall. They stepped inside. A few council members already gathered. The hall felt warm from a large fire pit. Arnvid told the council that Eirik carried strong focus after the storm night. He said Eirik should guide the next clearing tasks. The council agreed. Eirik accepted the duty without hesitation. They planned the day. They talked about repairing the roof of a storage building. They discussed gathering more firewood from the forest. They talked about checking the path leading toward the stream. When the council finished, Eirik returned to the longhouse to tell Asa. She welcomed the news with a soft smile. She said people trusted him. She said the storm changed him. Eirik sharpened a tool for the day's work. The boy played with a wooden cup. The fire glowed. Asa placed herbs in a small pouch and hung them near the wall to dry. Eirik stepped outside again. 4 villagers waited for him near the storage buildings. Yrsa carried a bundle of rope. Steinar held a hammer. 2 young men carried planks of wood. Eirik greeted them. They walked together toward the damaged roof. The roof held a split beam across the top. Snow piled along one edge. Eirik climbed the side ladder. Steinar steadied the bottom. Eirik set the new plank in place. Yrsa passed him a length of rope. He tied the plank tight until the beam sat firm. The 2 young men hammered nails into the wood. Snow slid off the roof as they worked. When the repairs ended, Eirik stepped down. Yrsa handed him a piece of dried fish. They ate together. The salt sharpened his senses. Steinar drank warm water and passed the horn. Eirik drank slow. His breath steadied. The group talked about the hunters. They wondered when they would return. Eirik said the ridge held no danger now. He said the path stood open. The others nodded with trust. They moved toward the forest edge to gather firewood. Asa joined them. She carried a small basket for herbs. The boy followed and dragged a stick along the snow. The group spread out. Eirik cut fallen branches. Yrsa tied them in bundles. Steinar carried heavy logs on his shoulder. Asa searched for herbs under shallow snow patches. The boy poked at tree bark and watched flakes fall. Eirik worked with steady rhythm. The smell of pine touched the air. The sound of branches breaking echoed between trees. Sunlight broke through the branches and cast soft lines on the snow. The forest felt peaceful. Irik's thoughts held the same calm. As they worked, Asa approached him with a handful of dried leaves. She said she found them near a root. She said her mother once used these leaves in broth to soothe breath. Irik thanked her. The boy held out a small branch he found. Erik tapped it against his palm and handed it back. The boy smiled and ran ahead. They finished gathering wood and returned to the village. People moved with steady energy. Smoke rose from chimneys. Dogs barked near the edge of the path. Children laughed in the snow. Irik stacked the firewood near the longhouse. Asa carried the herbs inside. The boy trotted behind her. Inside, Irik warmed his hands near the fire. Asa placed a pot of water on the stones. She added the dried leaves and stirred. The smell spread through the room. Erik sat and watched the steam drift upward. The boy climbed into his lap again. Erik rested his chin on the child's hair. Later, Arnvid visited. He stepped inside with slow steps, held a small carved piece of wood. He said he carved it the night before. He handed it to the boy. It looked like a small boat. The boy held it and smiled. Arnvid sat by the fire. Arnvid told them the hunters would return in 2 days. He said he wanted the village to prepare warm food for their arrival. He said the hunters should eat broth and barley first to settle their breath. He said smoked fat should follow to feed strength. He said dried berries should help restore focus. Asa nodded. She knew these customs. Erik listened. Arnvid said last meal foods were not only for nights of expected death. He said they shaped the return from hard journeys. He said people needed grounding after danger. Erik felt this truth settle in him. He looked at the boy. He imagined teaching him the same customs when he grew older. As the afternoon passed, Erik helped a neighbor move stones near her doorway. Asa visited her sister in another longhouse. The boy played with his carved boat near the fire. The village moved with calm purpose. Erik finished helping the neighbor and walked back toward the central path. He saw Arnvid standing alone by the well. The elder leaned on his staff. Erik walked toward him. Arnvid looked up. He said he felt tired. Erik offered his arm again. Arnvid accepted. They walked slowly together toward the far end of the village. Arnvid said the storm night brought memory back to him. He said he once faced the same fear Erik faced. He said he saw his own father eat a last meal before a long winter sickness. He said the food steadied him, even as danger pressed close. He said he never forgot the smell of smoked fat, the taste of salted fish, the warmth of barley broth. Erik listened with deep respect. Arnvid said Erik carried these customs forward with strength. He said the boy would learn from him. He said Asa would guide the child. He said the village stood safe because people honored simple truths. Erik felt emotion rise in his chest. He breathed slow. They reached the elder's doorway. Arnvid thanked him and stepped inside. Erik walked back toward the longhouse. When he entered, the room held warm light. Asa stirred the herb water again. The boy stacked wood pieces near the fire. Erik sat beside them. Asa handed him a cup of the warm herb drink. He drank. The heat spread through him. As night fell, the fire burned steady. Asa placed blankets near the floor. The boy lay down with his carved boat in his hand. Erik lay near him. Asa lay beside them both. The fire crackled in soft rhythm. Erik thought about the storm night one last time. He thought about the last meal on the stone, the storm at the fjord, the fear, the calm. He thought about Arnvid beside him. He thought about the customs passed through generations. He thought about the village that held him steady. He thought about Asa and the boy sleeping beside him. He felt no fear. He felt no weight. He felt life pressing forward with quiet strength. He closed his eyes, drifted into calm sleep. You stayed through every moment. Thank you. The next story will follow a lone woman who guarded her farm through a winter raid. I will share her meals, her customs, and her strength. Before you go, I left a small free story guide in the next video description. Rest now. Breathe slow. Keep warm. Let the fire inside you stay steady for the night.